The Valra Dominion ruled the stars without question. For 10,000 years, no enemy had ever made them tremble. Their fleets spread like fire through the void, their soldiers born without fear. Other species called them the Crimson Storm, because once the Valra arrived, the skies burned red. Fear was a word they had forgotten. Their children were taught that courage was natural, that hesitation was weakness. Their generals believed that only lesser beings knew fear. For ages, that belief stayed unchallenged until one day, a small blue planet appeared on their war charts. The planet was called Earth to the Valra. It looked insignificant, a forgotten rock covered with oceans and clouds. Tarvek, the Grand Commander, stared at the holographic display and laughed. "This will be easy," he said. "We will crush them before they even know we are here," his advisors agreed, calling humans primitive and emotional creatures. Their fleet prepared for another glorious conquest. But something about the humans was different. Their transmissions were strange, filled with laughter, music, and chaos. Their technology looked simple but unpredictable. Valra scientists said humans were unstable, violent, and irrational, a species driven by madness. Tarvek smiled. "Then they will fall even faster," he said. The invasion fleet left Valra Prime with banners of fire, the drums of victory echoing through the stars. When they reached Mars' orbit, everything was silent. The humans did not respond to hails, no defenses, no fleets, only empty space. Valra dropships moved closer to Earth's orbit, scanning for weapons. Then, one by one, their scanners went dark. An invisible force swept through the fleet, disabling communication. Valra officers panicked for the first time in their lives. "What happened?" shouted a captain before anyone could answer. The first ship exploded, not from outside fire, but from within. A human virus had infected their systems, turning their ships against each other. Tarvek stared at the chaos through his command screen. "Impossible," he growled. "They do not have the power to do this." But deep inside, something strange moved in his chest, something he had never felt before. It was small, cold, and sharp, and a whisper of fear. Still, he refused to believe it. He ordered the fleet to reform and descend upon the planet. "This ends now," he said as the Valra descended. Human defenses activated. Not massive fleets or powerful weapons, but clever tricks. Satellites exploded in waves of electromagnetic pulses, blinding alien sensors. Drones released clouds of metallic dust. Confusing targeting systems, missiles came from nowhere, striking precisely where the Valra ships were weakest. Every move humans made seemed to predict the next Valra command. It was as if humanity had studied them, known them and prepared for this moment. Valra Marines landed on the surface, expecting panic. Instead, they found silence. Human soldiers waited in ruined cities. Calm and ready, they fought with fire in their eyes. Even when wounded, they smiled. One Valra officer later said, "They fight like they already know death and do not fear it." Whole battalions disappeared into traps laid beneath burned streets. Every city became a graveyard. Every shadow a weapon. Tarvek demanded a report, but only static answered. The fleet was shrinking fast. Hundreds of ships lost without a single surrender signal. Then, a voice came through the universal channel, a human voice. "Calm and deep, Valra Dominion," it said. "You came looking for fear." The transmission paused. Every alien on every ship stopped moving. Then the voice continued. "You just found it." The message repeated across every frequency. It was not loud, but it carried weight. The Valra knew that something had changed. The galaxy's most fearless species had felt the first shiver of terror. They called for retreat, but it was too late. Their own ships began to self-destruct one after another. The sky above Earth turned red with fire as Valra wreckage rained down. In the silence that followed, humans stood under the falling debris. Watching quietly, they did not celebrate. They did not speak. They simply looked at the stars where the enemy had fled, and one human soldier whispered, "They'll be back." Another replied, "Then we'll be ready." Tarvek's fleet limped home with only fragments of ships left. Half of his command gone, the Valra Senate demanded answers. He gave none, only silence, but that night, the proud commander could not sleep. He kept hearing that human voice in the dark corners of his mind, and he realized something the Valra had never known. That true power was not in fearlessness, but in what one does despite fear. For the first time in Valra history, a commander felt afraid to look at the stars, because he knew what was waiting out there. Humanity, the bringers of fear. Weeks passed since the Valra's defeat near Earth. Their pride was wounded, their silence heavy. The Senate refused to believe that a young species could break their fleets, so they gathered a second armada. Twice the size, 10 times the power. Tarvek was ordered to lead again, though his eyes now carried the shadow of fear. "This time," said the High Counselor, "you will erase them from existence." Tarvek bowed but said nothing. He could still hear that human voice echoing in his memory. "You just found it." The words haunted him. He told himself it was only a trick, only strategy, yet deep down he knew it was more. The humans had changed something inside him, something the Valra never admitted to having: doubt. The armada departed, darkening the stars as it moved. Thousands of warships, battle cruisers, and carriers. A storm of crimson light. Their scanners found no sign of human activity near Earth or Mars. Only empty space. The Valra smiled again. Certain that humanity had fled, Tarvik, however, felt uneasy. He ordered caution. Slow movement, defensive shields raised, but his captains mocked him. "Fear has made you soft," they said. He did not answer. He only watched the darkness around them. Then strange signals began to appear. Tiny flickers of energy. Too weak to be ships. Too random to be natural. Sensor teams traced them, but they vanished before being locked. Moments later, the first Valra ship disappeared. No explosion. No signal. Just gone. A search drone found only drifting debris and a human symbol painted on the remains. A single white skull. "Impossible," whispered Taravek. "How could they get this close unseen?" Reports came from every direction. Ships losing power, communication jamming, unidentified echoes circling them. The humans had learned stealth, or perhaps they had always known it. They struck from the dark, unseen and unheard. Valra weapons fired blindly into the void, but nothing answered. And then the laughter began. A distorted human voice came through every comm channel. Low, calm, almost playful. "Still fearless?" It said. "Let's test that." Then all Valra systems flickered to black. The void was filled with silence. Only the sound of hearts beating inside armored suits. When power returned, half their fleet was gone. Destroyed without warning, the humans called it the War of Shadows. They used satellites disguised as debris, drones hidden inside asteroids, and ships cloaked with magnetic dust. Every move was a trap, every signal a trick. Valra officers began to refuse patrol duty, whispering of ghost ships that hunted them. The Senate ordered executions for cowardice. But fear was spreading faster than commands. Tarvik studied human battle recordings. Each one was the same. Small human fleets facing impossible odds, yet they never broke. They moved like a single mind, precise and calm. When captured humans were questioned, they never begged or trembled. One soldier, bleeding and bound, simply smiled and said, "You think we're fighting because we hate you," he whispered. "But we're fighting because we understand fear." Those words stayed with Taravek. He realized that humans were not fearless. They were friends with fear. They used it to stay sharp, to fight harder, to survive longer. Where the Valra saw fear as weakness, humans had turned it into strength. Soon, human forces began to strike deep into Valra space. They targeted supply convoys, communication relays, and outposts, always appearing from nowhere, always leaving messages carved in steel. "Remember Mars. Fear the shadows. We are watching." The Valra began to see shapes in the dark that weren't there. Some captains even destroyed their own ships, believing humans had boarded them. Taravek knew the war was slipping away. He called for the fleet to retreat and regroup near a red dwarf system. But when they arrived, a strange object was waiting. A human probe. It was small, ancient, and pulsing with light. When they scanned it, it transmitted a message in every known language. "Fear is a weapon too," the words echoed through every ship. The crew stared at the message in silence. For the first time in Valra history, no one moved. No one spoke. Even Taravek could not deny it now. Humanity had turned their greatest flaw into the deadliest strength. As the human fleets vanished back into the void, the Valra realized they were fighting an enemy they could not understand. An enemy that thrived in chaos, that grew stronger the more they were feared. And somewhere, far from any sun, a human commander watched the trembling alien transmissions and whispered, "They're starting to feel it. The war was far from over." But the Valra Dominion, once the empire without fear, had already lost something they could never reclaim: their certainty. Because now every shadow, every flicker, every whisper in the dark reminded them of one truth: that fear had returned to the stars and humanity was its messenger. The Valra Dominion had changed. Their ship still glowed red across the stars. But the light no longer meant pride. It meant warning, it meant fear. In every outpost, whispers spread about the humans. They said the humans could appear anywhere, vanish like smoke, strike without sound. The most fearless warriors now jumped at shadows. Commanders began to wear armor even when off duty. Afraid of being watched for the first time in their long history, the Valra were haunted by the unknown. Taravek stood in the Hall of Conquest, staring at the galaxy map. Dozens of Valra worlds were now marked with dark symbols, lost to humans. He remembered the old stories, how the Valra ancestors once ruled without mercy. They had burned whole species out of existence, believing fear made others weak, but now it was the Valra who were weak. Their fear was growing like a poison. The scientists gathered in secret and studied everything they could about humanity. They analyzed captured human data, history, and war footage. What they found disturbed them deeply. Humans had lived with fear since their first breath. Their entire evolution was shaped by it, running from predators, fighting impossible battles, surviving endless wars. But instead of destroying them, fear had made them stronger. They learned to fight through it. Not without it, they didn't erase fear, they tamed it, and now they were teaching the galaxy the same lesson. One scientist, an old Valra named Senril, showed Tarvek a video of human history. It showed cities burning, armies clashing, mushroom clouds rising, and yet every time they fell, they rebuilt. They are not fearless, Senril said quietly. They are relentless. Tarvek's hands trembled. They should not exist, he whispered. But they do, replied the scientist. And they are coming. The Valra fleet prepared another defense, building massive fortresses around key worlds. They created sensor webs, planetary shields, and weapons that could burn moons. But the humans never attacked directly. They came in silence, turning the Valra's own defenses against them. A shield generator would suddenly explode. A power grid would collapse. A shipyard would melt into plasma. No one saw them, but everyone felt them. Even the stars seemed darker wherever humans passed. The morale of the Dominion fell apart. Soldiers deserted, colonies stopped sending tribute, and through it all rumors spread that the humans were not flesh and blood anymore, that they were ghosts of war, that they could hear thoughts. Some said they were machines wearing human skin. Others believed they were death itself given form. Taravek tried to hold his empire together. He gave speeches, promised victory, ordered executions for cowardice, but no one listened. He stood before a massive crowd of soldiers and shouted, "We are Valra. We do not fear." Yet even as he said it, he could see the doubt in their eyes, and deep inside, he knew the truth. The humans had already won the battle for their minds. Then came the message. It arrived through every communication channel at once. In the human voice they all feared, calm, deep, unhurried. To the Valra Dominion, it said, "Your time of fearlessness is over. We warned you once, but you did not listen. Now, you will understand what fear truly means." The signal ended, and every Valra ship received a new transmission code, a countdown. No one knew what it was counting down to. For 3 days, the galaxy waited. Every second felt heavier, every sound sharper, and when the timer reached 0, nothing happened. No explosions, no attacks, only silence, but that silence was worse than destruction. Valra officers began turning on each other. They accused spies, executed innocents, tore their fleets apart in paranoia, and in the chaos, human fleets appeared again. This time not hiding, but marching forward in perfect formation. Their ships black as night, engines burning white. No music, no speeches, just cold precision. Every Valra defense collapsed without resistance. They no longer fought. They surrendered. When the human fleet entered the Valra home system, the sky itself seemed to darken. The capital trembled as thousands of ships hung in orbit, silent and waiting. Then the human flagship broadcast one final message. "Fear has returned to the galaxy," it said, "and you will never forget who brought it back." The Valra Senate surrendered before the first human shot was fired. They realized that the war had never been about victory. It was about reminding the galaxy, that fear was not the enemy. It was the warning, the balance, the truth. Taravek knelt in the great hall as the human fleet withdrew. No demand, no destruction, just departure. He looked at the fading stars and whispered, "Fear was our enemy," he said, "but it saved them." And in that moment he understood. The humans did not conquer the galaxy with weapons. They conquered it with understanding. The Valra Dominion had once ruled without fear. Now they ruled with the memory of it. And across the stars, wherever fear spread, so did the legend of the species that turned terror into power and returned it to the universe. The Valra Dominion, once proud and unshakable, was now silent. The great fleets that once thundered across the stars were reduced to fragments drifting through the void. Their banners no longer burned red. They floated tattered in the darkness like ghosts of arrogance. Fear had spread faster than any weapon, faster than light itself. It had broken the empire from within. Taravek walked through the corridors of the once mighty command citadel on Valra Prime. Every step echoed through emptiness. No soldiers saluted him anymore, no music of victory played. The air smelled of metal and failure in his mind. He still heard the human transmission, that calm voice that carried no anger and no mercy. "Fear has returned to the galaxy," it had said. And it was true. The Senate called an emergency session. Old leaders shouted for vengeance, demanding new fleets and new weapons, but none of them volunteered to lead. They remembered what had happened to those who faced humans. The generals stood in silence. No one dared to speak the words "we will win," because no one believed it. Outside the capital, refugees filled the streets, farmers, miners, engineers, all terrified of shadows in the sky. Every flicker of light was seen as a human attack. Mothers told their children stories, not of heroes but of humans. "Be good," they whispered, "or the humans will come." The legend had turned into religion. Even priests now prayed for protection from the species that lived among the stars unseen. Taravek sat alone in his chamber, watching the stars through the glass dome. He remembered how it began, with laughter, with pride, with certainty, and now all that remained was silence. He asked himself a question he could never answer. Why didn't they destroy us completely? Because deep down he knew humans could have, but they chose not to. They didn't want the Valra dead. They wanted them to learn. On the outer rim, human fleets remained motionless. They did not invade. They did not demand tribute. They simply watched, silent and patient. Sometimes a Valra sensor would catch a brief signal, a human ship passing like a shadow. Then nothing. It was a constant reminder that they were still there, waiting, observing, judging. The Valra tried to rebuild, but every attempt failed. Workers refused to leave orbit. Fearing human ambush, pilots refused to fly. Engineers refused to power the old weapons. The word fearless became forbidden. To speak it was to mock the truth. The last loyal fleet gathered around Valra Prime, 1,000 ships forming a desperate shield. But when human signals reappeared near the edge of the system, not a single weapon fired. The fleet stayed frozen, waiting for what would happen. And then, for the first time, humans revealed their message in person. A holographic projection appeared above every city, every ship, every command post. It showed a human officer standing in the light, his face calm, his eyes cold. "You have learned what fear is," he said. "Do not forget it again." Then the hologram dissolved, leaving only the symbol of Earth, surrounded by stars. No shots were fired. No ultimatums given. The humans turned and left, vanishing into deep space, but their silence carried more weight than any threat. Because the Valra now understood, the war was not meant to conquer them. It was meant to reshape them. Generations passed, and fear became their teacher. The Valra rebuilt slowly but differently this time. They learned humility. They learned patience. They built schools to study human history. They taught their young that fear was not to be erased but respected. Every soldier carried a badge that read, "Remember the humans." Taravek grew old. His scales dull with age, he often visited the Hall of Fear, a monument built where the first human message had been received. It was quiet there, filled with light. He would stand before the great inscription carved in both Valra and human script. "Fear is not weakness, it is awareness." He touched the letters and whispered, "We finally understand." One night as he watched the stars, a flicker appeared, a tiny light crossing the void. It was a human probe still transmitting after all these years. Its signal was faint but clear, repeating the same words again and again. "Lesson complete. Humanity moves on." Taravek smiled weakly. The humans had left the galaxy to its peace, but their shadow would never leave. As he closed his eyes for the last time, he thought about the ancient Valra belief, that the fearless are eternal. Now he knew it was wrong. It was the fearful, the aware, the cautious, who survived the longest. and with his final breath he whispered, "Thank you." Humans, above Valra Prime, the stars flickered like watching eyes. And across the galaxy, every empire remembered the same truth. Fear had returned to guide them, and humanity, the bringers of fear, had disappeared, leaving behind a legend that would never fade. Centuries passed, and the stars forgot the sound of war. The Valra Dominion was no longer an empire, only a memory scattered among the constellations. What once was conquest had become reflection. Worlds that had burned under their red banners now shone again with quiet peace. And everywhere one name remained untold yet never forgotten: humanity. The younger races whispered about them in low voices. Children in the colonies played games pretending to be humans. They built paper fleets and pretended to teach fear to their toy empires. Priests spoke of humans as cosmic spirits, the ones who had reminded the universe what humility meant. No one had seen a human in over 500 years, but no one dared to believe they were gone. In the archives of Valra Prime, a historian named Relten worked alone. He studied the final transmissions of the War of Fear. Old recordings showed shadows of human ships, cold lights drifting between worlds. He listened to the voices again and again. They were never loud, never cruel, only calm. Each word spoken like a teacher, not a conqueror. Relten began to write the Great Chronicle, the Legend of Fear. He wrote, "They did not bring destruction. They brought understanding. They did not demand worship. They demanded awareness." Every species added its own part to the story. The Zethri wrote of the day humans helped them end a civil war by doing nothing, only appearing in orbit, silent. The Turl remembered a single human ship saving a colony from a dying star, and then leaving without a word. The Kren told of a time when a holographic message appeared on their moon, saying, "Peace is not weakness," and then vanished. It was as if humanity had become the conscience of the stars, never seen, never heard, but always present. The Valra themselves changed most of all. Their armies became peacekeepers, their weapons dismantled, their greatest ships turned into museums of remembrance. Inside one stood a single preserved artifact, a human helmet, scratched and worn. On its surface were carved words that no Valra could forget. "Fear keeps you alive, generations grew." And one night, Relten's granddaughter, a young student, watched the night sky from the great observatory. She had heard the stories all her life, but wanted proof. "Are they real?" she asked her grandfather. Relten smiled softly. "Real enough to change everything," he said. "But why did they leave?" She whispered. He looked out the window at the endless darkness and answered, "Because their lesson was finished. The universe had entered a quiet age. Empires no longer sought endless conquest. Instead, they built schools, alliances, and memories. Yet in every council hall, one empty seat was always left, a seat for the unseen watchers, the ones who taught the stars to fear again. 1,000 years after the last human transmission, a signal was detected. It was faint, buried in cosmic noise, but undeniably human. It came from beyond the galactic rim. Scientists gathered, decoding its fragments. Only one sentence survived the distortion: "We are still watching." The message spread like wildfire. Worlds paused their work, fleets stopped moving. Every species turned their eyes to the edge of the galaxy. No one spoke, no one dared to answer, because they knew, wherever humans had gone, they had not vanished. They were out there, beyond the veil, beyond the reach of light, still guarding the lesson they had left behind in the quiet that followed. Relten's granddaughter looked up at the stars again. She felt something strange. Not fear, not dread, but respect. For the first time, she understood what the humans had truly meant. Fear was not about running, not about weakness. It was about knowing the cost of ignorance. It was the voice that warned civilizations not to repeat the past. Centuries later, the story of the humans became more than myth. It became the first universal law among the stars. Never forget fear, for it is the price of peace. Every empire, every race, every world followed it, and the galaxy thrived under its quiet protection. Somewhere far beyond the last mapped system, an ancient human vessel drifted in silence, its engines cold, its hull scarred, but its core still glowing with life inside. A message looped endlessly through time. Fear is not weakness, it is survival. Fear is not darkness, it is awareness. Fear is not death, it is the start of wisdom. The stars listened, the galaxy remembered, And the legend of the humans and the bringers of fear, the teachers of survival, became eternal. No one ever saw them again, but everyone, everywhere, still felt their presence in the quiet between the stars. And when the night grew too silent, the wise would whisper, they thought nothing could scare them. Until humanity entered the war.